Welcome everyone to a new deep dive. Today I want you to picture this. A kingdom right at the heart of medieval Europe, rich in silver, bursting with intellect, but also about to be shaken, really shaken to its core. We're jumping into a really tumultuous time in Bohemian history. We'll be focusing on the reigns of two, well, very different rulers, Wenceslas IV and his half-brother, Sigismund of Luxembourg. We're talking late 14th to early 15th century here, basically 1378 through 1437. Our main source for this is this fantastic essay. It details all the political intrigue, the religious revolution, royal betrayals, the birth of these huge reformist movements. It's gripping stuff. So our mission today, we want to pull out the really critical insights for you, help you understand how Bohemia became this epicenter of religious revolution that, echoed across Europe. It even sparked one of Europe's first sort of national awakenings. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do that. And as we unpack it, it's really important to remember this isn't just about two kings, it's about a whole kingdom at this profound crossroads. You've got power, new ideas, identity, all churning together. What's so fascinating and what the sources really bring out is how all these different things, royal ambition, these intellectual sparks, social unrest, how they all converged. And they didn't just converge, they actually redefined the entire region, influenced things for centuries. This period really turns Bohemia from this prosperous place into, well, a battleground. It kind of raises an important question, doesn't it? How did the actions of leaders, even passive ones or opportunistic ones, how do they end up shaping the very identity of a nation?
That's a great point. And to really get a handle on the challenges Wenceslas and Sigismund faced, we absolutely have to start with their father, Charles IV. This guy was one of Bohemia's most famous kings, right? And Holy Roman Emperor, too. He did so much, established Prague as this major political and cultural capital, founded Charles University in 1348. That was the first in Central Europe. Under him, Bohemia was booming. Prague was genuinely rivaling Paris in learning and splendor. It was a golden age. But then Charles dies in 1378, and this massive legacy, it falls onto Wenceslas IV. And the sources, they paint him as, well, unready, unpopular, sort of tormented by his father's shadow. Big shoes to fill.
Huge shoes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows how the sheer strength of a predecessor can sometimes overshadow or even hobble the person who comes next.
Yeah.
Especially like here when they're facing totally new challenges. Charles was this master diplomat, commanding figure. He set the bar incredibly high. And Wenceslas, he just struggled to meet it, particularly with all the internal stuff brewing.
Oh, he definitely struggled. So Wenceslas IV, he's crowned King of Bohemia at 17, King of the Romans soon after. His reign goes from 1378 to 1419. But like you said, total contrast to his dad. The sources call him volatile, indecisive. He got more and more isolated. His reign was just plagued by issues, nobility unrest, uprisings in the cities, these deepening religious divides. Apparently, he preferred hanging out with intellectuals and commoners rather than the big feudal lords, which you can imagine caused a lot of friction with the powerful nobles.
Yeah, bound to.
But what's interesting is his tolerance, maybe too tolerant for the times. He let reformist thoughts spread, which led to him being kind of sympathetic to Jan Hus. Then there's the Western Schism, multiple popes claiming power. Wenceslas just wavered, lost control of the imperial title, got himself dethroned as king of the Romans in 1400. Talk about humiliating.
Direct blow, yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting. He was so disliked, especially by the German princes, that his own nobles and even his brother Sigismund imprisoned him. Not once, but twice. 1394 and 1402. Imagine that. Locked up by your own family and nobles. What does that even tell you about royal power back then?
It tells you it was fragile, especially a place like Bohemia, which was already, complex and prone to splits. Wenceslas's tolerance, it seemed like a good thing on the surface, maybe. But in that heated religious climate, it probably just looked like weakness, made things more unstable. And his indecisiveness, yeah, that created a real power vacuum. It's fascinating how a king's personality, not just his policies, but his actual character, could shape the destiny of a whole kingdom, especially in a crisis. Ambitious figures, like his brother, they were just waiting for an opening like that.
Right. And while Wenceslas is kind of fumbling, the storm is gathering momentum. Jan Hus. He's rector at Charles University, preacher at Bethlehem Chapel, described as fiery. He's drawing on ideas from John Wycliffe in England, condemning indulgences, corruption in the clergy, the Pope's excesses, calling for a return to simpler early Christianity. And the Czech people, they really latched onto this, partly because of that resentment towards German dominance, towards church greed. It ignited this national religious revival right there in Prague. Wenceslas, true to form, kept vacillating. Sometimes he supported Hus, other times he caved to pressure from the church. Hus gets excommunicated in 1411, but he keeps preaching, and that just makes him even more popular, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely. It fuels the fire. We connect this to the bigger picture. The church trying to suppress dissent, it almost always backfires. It creates martyrs, rallies more support. We see it time and again.
Yeah.
And Hus's movement, it wasn't just theology. That's the key. It was this potent mix of national feeling and religious identity. Theology became revolution. He wasn't just challenging the Pope, he was challenging the whole structure of medieval society, setting a huge precedent.
Okay, so now Sigismund steps onto the main stage. Wenceslas's half-brother. The sources paint him as tall, eloquent, but also calculating, cold even. He'd become king of Hungary back in 1387, always had his eyes on bigger prizes, right? The Holy Roman Empire, Bohemia. So 1414, he convenes the Council of Constance, big goals, end the papal schism, deal with heresy, specifically Jan Hus. And here's the shocking betrayal. Sigismund invites Hus, promises him safe conduct, guarantees his safety, but when Hus gets there, arrested. And in 1415, burned at the stake. His last words, apparently. Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, have mercy on me. And the sources are crystal clear, those flames. They immediately sparked a full-blown revolution in Bohemia. Isn't it ironic? This Sigismund's calculated move, this betrayal, it makes him utterly hated in Bohemia.
But it also paves his way to the crown eventually. What's fascinating here is just the sheer ruthlessness of political power.
Yeah.
Solemn promises, safe conduct sacrificed for what he saw as stability or maybe just personal gain.
Yeah.
And that act,
Yeah.
it ignites the Hussite Wars. It fundamentally changed Bohemia's relationship with its king, with the church,
Rubber.
forever.
And the Hussite Wars kick off almost immediately. The first defenestration of Prague, 1419. A Hussite mob, led by this radical priest, Jan Hus, they storm the new town hall and literally threw the city councilors out the window, defenestration. Just days later, Wenceslas V dies. Maybe from shock, who knows. Bohemia descends into chaos. No clear air. You get these factions emerging. The moderates, the Utraquists, they wanted reform within the church. And then the radicals, the Taborites. They rejected pretty much all church authority. Apocalyptic warriors, some called them. Sigismund claims the crown, naturally. But the Hussites, no way. They refuse to accept the murder of Hus.
Understandably so.
What follows is just incredible. The Hussite War. Farmers, scholars, radical priests repeatedly beating imperial knights, crusaders sent against them. And they had this incredible military innovation, the Wagenburg, the war wagon.
Yeah.
Basically a mobile fortress made from farm wagons, armored up.
Exactly. Linked together, bristling with handguns, crossbows, even small cannons. It was revolutionary.
This was one of the first major uses of gunpowder weapons on a large scale in Europe, wasn't it?
It really was. A tactical masterpiece against traditional cavalry charges.
And their general, Jan Hus, legendary. Blind in one eye, later completely blind, never lost a battle. Apparently Napoleon studied his tactics centuries later. How did they do it? How did these, peasant armies keep winning?
It's a combination, really, if we connect this to the bigger picture. Firstly, that fervent belief. Their morale was sky high, almost unbreakable. They believed God was on their side. Secondly, those unconventional tactics. The Wagenburg neutralized the knights' biggest advantage to the charge. It created a stable platform for their firearms and crossbows. It shows how innovation and, frankly, belief can overcome superior numbers and traditional military thinking. Remember, this wasn't just religious, it was social too. Commoners rising up against the feudal lords, against the church establishment. That adds a whole other layer of determination.
So Sigismund keeps trying. 5 crusades launched against them between 1420 and 1431.
And he lost every single one.
Every single one. Prague holds out, the Hussite armies keep winning, Catholic Europe is stunned. But Sigismund, he was an opportunist, right? He shifts tactics. He starts negotiating, not with the radicals, but with the moderates, the Utraquists. He offers them reforms like communion under both kinds, letting the laity receive both bread and wine, which was a key Hussite demand.
A clever move. Divide and conquer.
Exactly. The Utraquists, they were getting tired of war, probably scared the radicals getting too powerful too. So they agree. This leads to the radicals, the Taborites, being crushed by the moderate Hussites with some Catholic help at the Battle of Lipany in 1434. And finally, in 1436, Sigismund is crowned King of Bohemia.
Finally. But at what cost?
Right. A hollow victory, the sources suggest. Prague was scarred, the kingdom divided. He'd subdued Bohemia, but never truly ruled it. He died just a year later, 1437, a weary emperor.
It really shows Sigismund's pragmatism, doesn't it? Even a ruthless ruler has to adapt when brute force fails. Diplomacy, compromise, finding the fracture points in the opposition. But that victory, as you say, it came at an immense cost. left the kingdom fragmented, traumatized. It highlights that military wins don't always equal lasting peace or real power. The scars ran deep.
And those scars, but also the ideas, lingered. Bohemia was changed forever by this whole period. The Hussite movement, even though militarily crushed in its radical form, it survived. And it absolutely set the stage for Martin Luther, for the Protestant Reformation, a century later.
You could draw a direct line.
Definitely. Here's a mind-blowing legacy. The Hussites were essentially the first successful religious revolutionaries in Europe. Their ideas directly fed into Lutheranism, Calvinism, even the English Reformation. And their struggle, it forged this unique Czech identity, rooted in their language, their specific religious experience, and this defiance against the empire and the papacy. You could almost say Bohemia's brief attempt at religious independence was like a glimpse of Europe's future, a continent of nations, not just empires ruled by crowns.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this period really is the beginning of the end for that old medieval order. Power is shifting. Identities are being reforged. And it speaks to the endurance of ideas, doesn't it? How even movements that seem defeated can plant seeds. Seeds that just wait for the right conditions to flower into massive historical change later on. It raises that important question again. How does that collective identity solidify? Through shared struggle, through defiance, even when facing impossible odds.
It really does, and that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. Looking back, the reigns of Wenceslas V and Sigismund, yeah, they were chaotic, destructive, no doubt about it, but they weren't just another couple of chapters in history. They were the start of something new, fundamentally new. Charles V built a golden age. Wenceslas left behind a broken court. Sigismund kind of ruled over the ashes. But out of that destruction came an empowered laity, people questioning things, a population unwilling to just blindly follow crowns or crosses anymore. So what does this all mean for you listening? I think this deep dive really shows how individuals, big ideas, intense conflicts, even in a small kingdom back then, can spark these huge transformations, changes that ripple across continents, define whole eras.
And perhaps a final thought to leave you with. What might Europe look like today if the Hussites had fully succeeded? If they'd managed to establish that religious independence much earlier? And even though they didn't fully succeed in that sense, how did their partial success, their sheer resilience, still manage to fundamentally shape the future of religious freedom and national identity across the whole continent? It really makes you ponder the enduring power of ideas, doesn't it? Even when they seem suppressed or defeated. Something to think about.